The federal budget includes some big-ticket expenditures, but also cuts to the public service as the government tries to prop up the economy at the same time during a trade war with the United States. The story is told in the numbers. $141 billion in new spending over the next 5 years to be offset by about $60 billion in cuts and other savings. It all means a projected deficit of $78 billion over the 2025-26 fiscal year. That is lower than some economists expected, but higher than what the previous Liberal government had planned. That was before U.S. President Donald Trump launched his trade war. Here's how the Finance Minister, François-Philippe Champagne, summed it up in the House of Commons.
This budget must be generational in its ambition and serve to shape our economy and our nation's future. Bold and swift action is what is needed. To weather the storm of uncertainty, we will not lower ourselves, Mr. Speaker. Quite the opposite. We will raise them to catch the winds of economic change because we believe in Canada.
All right, to begin breaking down what it all means, let's bring in senior business reporter Peter Armstrong. He was in the budget lockup going through the document before it was publicly released. And Peter, what's your big takeaway from this budget?
It's a good question, Ian, because these budgets are always just an exercise in storytelling, right? The federal Liberals here are trying to tell us a story about what they're going to do with our tax dollars. And you can zoom in and look at all the sort of granular details, or you can zoom out and try to figure out what's the broader story they're telling here. And I think the broader story is the more interesting one. It is the story of an economy and of a budget that is going to try to move that economy out of the crisis it's in towards a better place, towards a place where we have more diversified trade options, where the Canadian economy is working and not as dependent on the United States as it is. But getting there, Ian, it's going to be really hard. This is a high degree of difficulty, to steal a phrase from the Olympics, and a slim margin of error, right? The problem is while that is important to try to get us to that better, good place, there's a crisis happening underfoot. Right? We all know the Canadian economy is really struggling. We're going to get GDP numbers later this month that'll tell us whether or not Canada slipped into a recession over the summer or not. And even if we didn't, even if we dodged, as it looks like we probably did, an outright recession, the fact is the economy is in a tough spot right now. And if it grew 0.1% or declined 0.1%, that doesn't make a huge difference to the people at home. And there's not a ton in this budget, in spite of all that stuff that we've just listed on the screen that they're doing and that's important and that is going to change the way the government sort of uses the economy or interacts with the economy. There's not a ton in this that's going to tell us, that's there if there's a sweeping growth in unemployment rate, or that if the economy continues to get worse rather than kind of hold course as we expect. And so the degree of difficulty is pretty high in this. The margin for error is very slim, and the clock is ticking, right? There's a real time element here where the federal government needs to get this stuff done, or at least moving, before the economy really, gets too stuck in the mud in the day-to-day interactions of the day.
Yeah, and so that mud is coming in part from the United States, right? The budget comes as the economy's been buffeted by the trade war, and so many businesses hoping for some relief in this budget. What have you been hearing today from business leaders?
So it's been a bit of a crazy day. And then, all the politics have been happening as well. And the politics kind of gave me a moment to take a step back and make some phone calls and talk to some people about their reaction to the news in the budget. And on the one hand, there's this pivot, and then you can kind of zoom in on what are they actually trying to get done. And there's a really good example in the tax breaks that they're offering to manufacturers and processors. So like really big businesses, if you're going to expand your operations even a little, if you've got to build a new, sort of building on your property to expand your growth, or you've got to buy a new piece of equipment, or you've got to buy a new truck to help you deliver, all of that stuff can be written down really quickly and at 100%. So that's a huge change. And I think the businesses I'm hearing from are very happy with that change. Their concern is about implementation. And I think there's a sense over the years that the previous iteration of this Liberal government often had really big, bold ideas, but struggled oftentimes, most of the time, with the actual implementation of it and the ability to get the work done on the ground that allows these programs to really thrive and do well. And that's the concern I'm hearing today, that, okay, we think this would be good if they can get it done and we can get to a place where this helps me and my business. But can they thread that needle? Can they get the work done on the ground that's required to help them? Can they stave off a recession and the economy getting worse instead of better, or at least not flatlining? And that too is that implementation, Ian, is going to be a big challenge for this government.
Yeah, the other issue, Peter, of course, is when there's a tax cut, that means less revenue, and that potentially means a bigger deficit. The projected deficit here, I mean, it is an eye-popping number.
It is.
Roughly $78 billion. How manageable is that?
So there's kind of two responses to that. One is like the regular me's and the you's of the world that hear that and say, what are you talking about? The deficit is just, the how much more money a government spends in a year than it makes. And if you and I were doing that, we'd be going to the payday loan to try to get ourselves out of trouble. Governments exist on a different plane, of course, but there's also a question of what a lot of this budget is trying to do is draw international investment, right? And even national investment. They're trying to draw capital off the sidelines and say, look, Canada's a place to invest your money right now. Canada's a great place to try to get a piece of the action as we try to grow our way out of the crisis tied to the tariffs and the trade war. And when I talk to international investors, whether they're in Asia or the City of London or Wall Street or wherever they may be, they're looking around the world and they're seeing the American fiscal situation. They're spending way more money by any measure, by any way of sort of parsing it. They're spending way more money there. The countries in Europe are in way more they don't have the fiscal capacity is the technical language for it. And so the sense from them that I'm hearing is that Canada, the cleanest dirty shirt or the safest port in the storm, that we have a better credit rating. We have a better sense of the financing than a lot of these other countries, even with this new eye-popping number that makes people like me and you, our heads explode. When they look at it, they see it compared to everybody else in the world, everyone else in the OECD or the G7, and they say, actually, Canada's got its house comparatively in order. And so even with these new numbers, and if they invest this extra capacity in stuff that can grow the economy, in making a better port and in building a pipeline and in building copper mines, then that's stuff that those investors can get on board with and get behind and get some of that capital off the sidelines, and that would be a net good. But again, I mean, we're talking about the slimmest of margins and a pretty thin needle to try to thread, Ian.
All right, Peter Armstrong, always fantastic having you on the program.
You bet.
Karina Roman joins us now, also in Ottawa. And what can you tell us about what's happening right now with the minority Liberal government getting this budget passed?
Well, at the beginning of the day, they needed 3 MPs from other parties to either abstain or vote in favor of the budget to get it passed. That's the margin that they needed to make at some point when we actually get to a vote. Now they only need 2 MPs, and that's because Chris D'Entremont resigned from the Conservative caucus and joined the Liberals just this evening. So there's a new Liberal MP, and that changes the math dramatically. This is a huge development. It's still unfolding. We're still getting reaction. There is a statement from Chris D'Entremont via the Liberal Party that we can give you a little bit of, saying Prime Minister Mark Carney is offering that path with a new budget that hits the priorities I have heard most in my riding to build strong community infrastructure and grow a stronger economy. That is why I am joining the government caucus. After 5 years of serving in opposition, the people of Acadianapolis and all Canadians, that's his riding, by the way, and all Canadians know that the moment we face today needs all of us to lead, not with complaint, but with confidence in a strong future. And he said he made this decision after seeing the budget and talking to family and friends. So that is quite a big development and a huge turn of events that changes the math that now they only need 2 MPs.
And this show is, of course, live, and we will continue to watch and see if there is any more reaction or explanation about what would induce him or at least motivate him to cross the floor, particularly on this day, just over 6 months since the election. Okay, let's talk more broadly now. Karina, what's the reaction been to the budget?
Well, they're not going to get, the Liberal government's not going to get those 2 MPs that now needs from the remaining Conservative caucus, at least not if Leader Pierre Poilievre has anything to say about it. Have a listen to what he said in the House of Commons today.
Our party wanted an affordable budget for an affordable life. And on behalf of all the Canadians who can no longer afford to eat, heat, or house themselves because of Liberal inflation, we Conservatives cannot support this costly Liberal budget.
Now, the Bloc Québécois also doesn't like the budget, although for different reasons, basically saying there's nothing for Quebec in it. Have a listen.
I hardly see how, after having met with our caucus tonight, we could vote in favor of this budget. Those $78 billion of deficit, whatever tricks they want to invent. There's nothing of what we did ask in the budget.
Now, Green Party leader and the only Green MP, Elizabeth May, says she wouldn't vote for the budget as it is, but if the government were open to amendments, that might be a different story. The NDP is reserving its decision about how it's going to vote for now. Interim leader Don Davies saying there are things in there they like, but there's also things they don't like. And that includes cuts to the public service. Have a listen.
We have to remember behind every job is a service. Do Canadians really want to wait 6 months to get a passport? You want to wait 3 months to get a call back from CRA? The seniors want to wait to get their old age security checks? These are the kind of real life consequences of cutting public sector workers there are.
So if they are going to find 2 MPs to either stay home, abstain, vote in favor, right now it does sound most likely from the NDP just because they have not closed the door on how they're going to vote yet.
And Karina, what does the budget signal about the way forward for this government?
Well, politically, you can tell just from what's in it that this is a budget that they think is necessary regardless of what the opposition. This is not a budget trying to appease the opposition in big ways. They believe it's necessary to do these things regardless of what the opposition has asked for or says. There maybe have been some softening in the language around the public service cuts to appease the NDP. And in terms of the NDP, if it does come around to voting for or abstaining and helping the budget pass, I think some might think that they're doing so while holding their nose. It's not a real show of support. In terms of its signal to Canadians, this has been telegraphed for many weeks. There's not any huge surprises in here, but the question really remains, and I think Canadians will be looking for this, is can the government execute what it wants to do? It's all fine and well to have a plan like this, and whether you actually think it's fully ambitious or whether it's just midway ambitious, it still has to be executed to make the changes they want to make. And Canadians will have to see how patient they are, because the government and the Prime Minister has said it might take a while for things to turn around, even with this ambitious budget. And we'll have to see how patient Canadians are to see those results.
Karina Roman in Ottawa, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Among the measures intended to spur the economy are billions of dollars for the armed forces, aimed at recruiting more personnel and buying new equipment, which the government wants to have made here in Canada. CBC's Murray Brewster joins us now. And Murray, put into perspective, how much of an investment in the military are we seeing here?
Well, Ian, it's an historic investment. Normally, when the Defense Department comes away from a federal budget, they're very much like that Dickens character in Oliver Twist, asking for more, sir. But this really flips the script for the Defense Department. We're looking at approximately $81.8 billion in terms of investment. Now, we already found out about $9 billion of that $81 billion when the Prime Minister said that Canada was going to meet its 2% NATO defense spending target. That was back in June. But it's been officially put into the budget now, so we're looking at officially an increase of $81.8 billion over 5 years, and the Finance Minister was quite excited to trumpet this. Have a listen.
A confident nation that protects its sovereignty at home and its interests abroad through strength, stability, and partnership with allies. We share our values. This is what we're doing, Mr. Speaker.
So there are billions of dollars more for training and recruiting, roughly $20 billion over 5 years. We're also looking at new equipment and money going into defense infrastructure and also beefing up cybersecurity defenses in what was in today's budget document.
And Murray, this budget invests in more than just the military. Tell us about that.
Well, it does because there is $6 billion being set aside for building up Canada's defense industry. So the best example I can give you is that there are munitions makers in this country and they make artillery shells. They don't make perhaps the right kind of artillery shells and they have to open a new production line. So there's going to be money set aside for that. There's also going to be money in there potentially eventually for building up other defense industries because the government wants to be able to build certain pieces of military equipment in Canada for sovereign security reasons. So there was money in the budget today for that.
The government is committed to spending, as we all know, 5% of the GDP on defense by 2035. That is a big percentage. What does this budget say about that goal?
Well, it is a big percentage, and it's a big bill to pay because eventually it could mean about $150 billion a year in spending on defense and defense infrastructure. Now, let's break down that 5% figure for a moment. 3.5% of the GDP would go directly towards the military, a direct spend on the military, another 1.5% on defense infrastructure. So in today's budget, we really didn't get a lot of detail about that 3.5% and how it's going to be spent. It was all just kind of vague and we're going to be doing this over the next 5 years, et cetera. But there wasn't a lot of detail there. But interestingly, on the defense infrastructure, the government was very confidently said that when you add up everything that the federal, provincial, and municipal governments spend on emergency management, for wildfires as an example, or telecommunications, that is able to account for the 1.5% of GDP. So they're confident that they've already got that, and the message there is that they're already on their way to spending 5% of GDP.
All right, Murray, thank you so much.
You're welcome.